Millions of people have high hopes for Bitcoin. Many people envision that Bitcoin will make them wealthy if they hold it long enough. Why do people think that Bitcoin will keep going up? And does economics and common sense support that view? Although Bitcoin's original purpose was to create a trustworthy form of money, most people buy it in the hope of selling it at a higher price. Since the total amount of Bitcoin will never exceed 21 million, Bitcoin promoters think that Bitcoin could reach a price of $1 million or more if only part of the money supply of the world is replaced with Bitcoin. How much higher could Bitcoin go? There is a lot of money in the world. According to this source, there is almost $40 trillion in liquid money, $90.4 trillion of broad money, and a worldwide value of the broadest category at $215 trillion. These are 2020 figures, so they are probably higher now. Even if these figures are somewhat inaccurate, no one can doubt it is a big number. If people started using Bitcoin as liquid money, and it was the only form of money, then each Bitcoin would be worth almost $2 million. If we include a broader category of money worth $90.4 trillion, then each Bitcoin would be worth more than $4.3 million. If Bitcoin was used as the broadest category of money, then each Bitcoin would be worth more than $10 million. Few people think that Bitcoin will ever be the only form of money, but it does illustrate how some people think it may reach such a high potential if only a fraction of the money supply was replaced by Bitcoin. But does Bitcoin serve well as money? And if not, what else could propel Bitcoin upward? The primary purpose of Bitcoin was to serve as money that does not require intermediation by financial institutions. The purported benefits is that transactions cannot be reversed, the cost of intermediation is eliminated, and some privacy is achieved. But how well does Bitcoin serve as money? Money serves three purposes: as a means of payment, as a unit of account, and as a store of value. But these three properties require one more property: stability of value. Because the value of Bitcoin is highly unstable, inflation and deflation occur repeatedly. People were complaining about inflation when it was higher than 8% over 1 year for the US dollar. How would they feel about 50% over a few months, or 5% within a few days? Whenever you buy or sell something, you will need to look up the current value of Bitcoin because it changes constantly. For instance, the price of Bitcoin changed by more than 5% during a recent 5-day period in September 2022. Despite its volatility, there are some things you could buy with Bitcoin. However, many businesses that accept Bitcoin are doing so for the PR value. Most of them probably immediately convert the Bitcoin to fiat currency to offload the risk. And they can only afford to accept Bitcoin because they know that it will only be a small portion of their sales, which reduces the volatility risk. Prices, as measures of the units of account, indicate the value of something, but if prices are unstable, then prices may not reflect current values. Menus would have to be changed constantly. Just think how hard calculating investment returns or accounting would be. If you bought a house for 10 Bitcoins, then sold it later for 15 Bitcoins, did you profit? In fact, you do not even know if you have a profit from the information presented here. Even though you have 5 more Bitcoins, if the value of one Bitcoin was worth $35,000 when you bought the house and worth $20,000 when you sold the house, then you actually have a loss of $50,000. This illustrates how an unstable currency makes financial calculations and planning much more difficult. El Salvador legalized the use of Bitcoin as legal tender in September 2021, coexisting with the United States dollar, which is also used as legal tender in that country. El Salvador does not have its own currency, but underscoring the impracticality of using Bitcoin for accounting, the law in El Salvador also stipulates that the dollar be used as a reference currency in accounting. It would be way too difficult for a business or other large organization to do accounting when each item of income or expenses would depend on when the income was received or when the expenses were paid. And since Bitcoin can decline at any time, it cannot reliably hold value. This is how fast you can lose money. The volatility of Bitcoin can easily be seen in this chart. During this 3-month period, Bitcoin has dropped almost 50%. The current price, about 1 year and 3 months later, is less than $20,000. The main cause of Bitcoin's volatility is its fixed supply. While some Bitcoin will continue to be created for the next 120 years, most Bitcoins that will ever exist already exist. The few additional Bitcoins that remain to be created will not affect supply much. In any case, the supply is not related to demand, which will fluctuate much more rapidly than the supply will increase. Demand will continually change because people need to sell Bitcoin for fiat currency to spend, and many people will sell for profits or to avoid losses. If people are not buying Bitcoin to use as money, then why are they buying? They think its price will keep going up. And they think that because so many people are trying to convince them to buy. Hype helps to increase demand, especially endorsements from celebrities, not only for Bitcoin, but also for other cryptocurrencies and non-fungible tokens. Matt Damon said in one of his commercials for a cryptocurrency exchange that fortune favors the brave. Sometimes, but sometimes the brave get slaughtered. Why the hype? Astute people see chickens for the plucking. Penny stocks lure them in. Network marketing lures them in. Why not cryptocurrency? Enough people are always falling for quick rich schemes, which is why the people who set up the schemes, or who simply take advantage of potential schemes, are the only ones getting rich quickly. Bitcoin was not designed as a Ponzi scheme, but nonetheless, it works like one that can work better if it is hyped enough. Obviously, people who invested a lot of money in Bitcoin will do their best to promote it. After all, they want it to sell at a higher price. Besides the three desirable qualities of money, money also provides effective tools to maximize economic wealth. Controlling the money supply and interest rates is one of the best ways to optimize the economy. The wealth of a society is maximized when the economy is optimized, not running too hot or too cold. The economy is easiest to optimize with monetary tools, which are implemented by central banks. The best tools to optimize the economy are being able to create and destroy money and to set interest rates. Inflation results when aggregate demand exceeds aggregate supply, whereas recessions occur when aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply. The central bank controls aggregate demand mainly through adjusting interest rates, raising them higher when demand is higher, and vice versa. But to use monetary tools effectively, the economy must be closely monitored, not only to assess its present state, but also to measure how well monetary policy is working. The supply of Bitcoin is fixed, so inflation or deflation will result as economic conditions change or aggregate demand changes. While the supply of other cryptocurrencies are not fixed, their supply is not related to any local economies, which will also cause inflation or deflation within that economy. Multiple currencies within one economy can wreak havoc, making monetary policy tools ineffective, especially if some of those currencies are private, since optimizing the economy would require controlling all the currencies within that economy. Multiple currencies also increase inefficiencies in the economy by constantly requiring the lookup of exchange rates among the currencies. And just think how hard business accounting would be if a business accepted more than one currency. Furthermore, private cryptocurrencies as worldwide currencies cannot be adjusted for a single economy, so monetary tools could not be used to optimize that economy. Moreover, private cryptocurrencies as worldwide currencies cannot be adjusted for a single economy. Private parties would control monetary policy and would benefit from seigniorage, creating a strong incentive to increase the money supply. For instance, if Bitcoin was the national currency, how would governments have responded to the COVID-19 pandemic? Being able to print money to pay people who could not work allowed them to survive and even thrive, and it saved most people from financial ruin. These disadvantages of private cryptocurrencies are great enough that no country issuing its own currency would ever approve of a currency it had no control over. Bitcoin has other disadvantages. Bitcoin mining consumes a stupendous amount of energy, an estimated 150 terawatt hours of electricity annually, more than the entire country of Argentina, and emits 65 megatons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere annually, as much as the entire country of Greece. All this waste and pollution for something that has no economic value whatsoever. Furthermore, Bitcoin transactions are slow and expensive. But even if Bitcoin transactions were instant and free, its volatility will still prevent it from becoming a major currency. Where Bitcoin is legal tender, it is not being used as such. Bitcoin officially became legal tender in El Salvador on September 7, 2021. But since then, it has been reported that very few people use Bitcoin as legal tender. Bitcoin may be used as money in corrupt countries such as Argentina, especially when it is difficult to get other currencies such as the US dollar. But even Argentines recognize that Bitcoin is risky and would rather use a more stable currency. Eventually, Argentina will get a better government, or Argentines can use cryptocurrencies issued by a central bank of one of the major countries, such as the United States. Bitcoin was created because of the disadvantages of financial institutions, especially for the transfer of funds. The transfer of electronic fiat currencies is slow because the bureaucracies of financial institutions are hampered by regulations, intermediaries, and outdated procedures. Outdated government regulations and procedures slow money transfers even within countries. In the United States, for instance, it takes 3 business days to transfer funds between banks of different companies. International payments and fund transfers require the use of correspondent banks in other countries, which increases delays and costs. The typical international remittance fee is about 5%. International payments and fund transfers also use different methods and systems, such as SWIFT and FedWire. Some of the advantages of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies arise from the lack of regulation that applies to the financial institutions of any country. But financial institutions are regulated because they can have major effects on the economy, and they are used to implement monetary policy and to fight financial crime, such as money laundering. Money is central to any economy, which is why no government is going to allow the subversion of those regulations through cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies will be more tightly regulated, especially if they become more prevalent. Otherwise, why bother subjecting financial institutions to regulations easily subverted by cryptocurrencies? Blockchain and distributed ledger technology may be useful, especially for international fund transfers. Many central banks are already experimenting with their own distributed ledgers and digital currencies to facilitate money transfers. Moreover, faster and cheaper international transfers of funds can be achieved without cryptocurrencies. Central banks are improving other technologies for moving money, which will eliminate any advantages cryptocurrencies currently have. The Federal Reserve, for instance, will soon be deploying their new FedNow system for instant payments. Although Bitcoin was not intended as a Ponzi scheme, it works like one. Since Bitcoin is not usable as money, its price will not rise because people want to use it as money. Instead, it can only rise with hype. Crypto whales, especially, are eager to promote Bitcoin so that they can pump up the price, then dump their large holdings for a higher price. The classic pump and dump scheme. Eventually, people learn, so they will stop buying, then Bitcoin will plummet. The reason why Bitcoin will finally disappear is because it, like all cryptocurrencies, requires a blockchain. Bitcoin is not like a paper currency that you could stuff under your mattress, or a coin that you could put in your piggy bank. Eventually, the interest in Bitcoin will decline to such a level that it will no longer be profitable to either mine Bitcoins or to record their transactions. Therefore, there will be no incentive to maintain the many blockchains that exist for Bitcoin, to maintain the integrity of the ledger. Blockchains cost money to maintain. No money, no blockchain. No blockchain, no Bitcoin. When will it disappear? I have no idea. Bitcoin may even go up, and probably will to some extent, but at some point it will decline permanently. It is impossible to predict when. It will probably follow the trajectories of other cryptocurrencies, trending downward but with so-called bear market rallies. What about other cryptocurrencies? There are now more than 21,000 cryptocurrencies, and that number is still increasing rapidly. Having different currencies in an economy could wreak havoc, since economies are greatly influenced by the money supply. If more currencies serve as money, then their aggregate total would need to be considered to predict their influence on the economy. Monetary policy couldn't work if some of the currencies are privately controlled. And many new cryptocurrencies continue to be created. This is just the first page of many pages of new cryptocurrencies displayed at CoinGecko. The new cryptocurrencies on this page have all been created within a recent 12-day period. Unless these cryptocurrencies have real value, being used as something other than money, they too will eventually disappear. It is a certainty that most of these cryptocurrencies will disappear eventually. Thank you very much for your time. If you liked my video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. I would appreciate any suggestions, so please leave them in the comments below. Check out my website at thismatter.com for more than 850 in-depth fundamental tutorials on personal finance, investments, and economics. Check out my books on money at williamspalding.com. Thank you.